Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. I am not, because another year is coming on, and I feel like I'm about to have an existential crisis. Woo! Today we're going to be taking a look at every single book I have read in 2022, both for me to, go and reminisce about all the stuff I've read, but also to show you guys some of the stuff I like to read and don't like to read. Give you a taste of my taste. I set my Goodreads challenge for 40 books, and I'm currently at 38. You're saying, what's going on? Did you fail? Are you a failure or something? Hell no. I'm actually recording this on December 13th, and you're probably thinking, whoa, Jesus, have you recorded every video for this channel before the channel actually started? Yes, I did. I have a busy holiday season coming up, what can I say? But anyway, yeah, so I'll mention the 38 books that I have read, the one I'm currently reading, and then the rest is Mistborn Era 2, which I'm not going to bother discussing because I'm about to make a Mistborn Era 2 review, so... yeah. So I'm in a book club. I should mention that. We meet every single week, and it usually takes us 2 or 3 weeks to get through a book. And we choose the books on a rotation. So oftentimes I'm not the one picking the book. So there are some here that I would have never read otherwise. These Violent Delights. This is a romance novel that takes place in 1920s Shanghai, and it is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet. The catch this time, though, is that they are fighting Cthulhu. Yes, there have been sea monsters let loose on the city, and they are sprouting worms that are going into people and making them kill themselves. So now it's up to Romeo and Juliet to put a stop to it. The problem is that at this point in their relationship, they're broken up and they're bitter towards each other. So yeah. Honestly, I gave this a 3 stars. I did not hate it. I actually had some fun with it. I think because I didn't really take it seriously at all. I just thought the premise was so insane. It was so over the top and violent that I kind of had a good time with it. And it was kind of interesting seeing, like, knowing the original story of Romeo and Juliet, seeing how they, that added their own little twist to it. Is this something I would ever read again or recommend? Not really. And we are going to be discussing the sequel in a bit as well. But yeah, overall, I expected to hate this book and very shockingly did not. The Tower of the Swallow by Andrzej Sapkowski. Please let that be right. This is the 4th Witcher book in the Witcher saga, and I'll be honest, this might be a bit of a hot take. Not the biggest fan of the Witcher saga. Which is a little weird, because I'm a massive fan of the video game series. The Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games of all time. But while I think that the characters and the world that Sapkowski has built in his Witcher saga are really, really good, the story just really doesn't do much for me, and I think the games handle it a lot better. That being said, Tower of the Swallow was definitely my favorite of the books. So yeah, I enjoyed this one, gave it a 4 stars. Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. This is one of his young adult series, and this one I think probably gets overlooked a lot because of that YA label, because most people assume YA is trash. I would agree with them, but I did really enjoy Skyward. I thought it was a lot of fun. It's like a science fiction. We have our main girl going to like the academy and stuff to become a space pilot. It was just, I just thought it was really cool and inventive. I really liked all the mystery he was setting up, and I don't think being intended for a younger audience really hurt it or held it back that much. It's definitely not as complex as his more adult books, but I think if you have an itch for more Sanderson stuff and you haven't checked out his YA content, honestly, I don't think you can go wrong with it. There's a lot of garbage young adult stuff out there. This is not it. This one also gets 4 stars. So then there's the Percy Jackson series, which I also just did a full video on, so I'm not really going to be getting into much there. But I did do it with my book club. We all greatly enjoyed it, had a really fun time reminiscing, reliving one of these fantastic series from our childhoods, and I cannot wait for the exciting future that the series still has. Lightning Thief was 4 stars, Sea of Monsters was 3, Titan's Curse and Battle Labyrinth both 4, and Last Olympian got a whopping 5 stars out of me. And then The Lady of the Lake by Andrzej Sapkowski. So probably a reason why I'm so lukewarm on the Witcher saga is this book, how it all wraps up. Because unfortunately, while The Tower of Swallows was my favorite of the books, this was my least favorite. I thought it was extremely boring, which was a bit weird because I didn't find any of these books boring before. But yeah, I just found this book to be way, way too long, and a lot of the big story events happening in it didn't really make me feel anything. It doesn't help that I had already played The Witcher 3 several times, and I think that game, it does like a lot of the same things that this book does, but I think in a much better and more streamlined way. So yeah, The Witcher Saga, would I recommend it? I mean, yes, probably, but I'm not going to go out of the way to call it one of my favorites. Next up is Starsight, the sequel to Skyward, and yeah, I had just about as much fun with this one as I did the first. What's interesting about the Skyward books is that each of them changes things up quite a bit. It's actually a bit alarming how much things change between the books. Just, you know, the setting you're in, the characters you're following. It's a huge change, and I think a change that a lot of people aren't always going to vibe with, which I think is one of the reasons why the sequels have not been rated as highly as the first. But I think Starsight was pretty enjoyable. I think it did some interesting things, had some fun new characters. Yeah. Lovely, 4 stars as well. Our Violent Ends is the sequel to these Violent Delights, which we also read with Book Club. And this, yeah, okay, at this point, the magic of the goofy premise, the sea monsters killing people and stuff, it had sort of faded. And what we're left with, it was a pretty lame book. I did not enjoy this one really at all. I gave it a 2 stars, so it like wasn't the worst thing I had ever read. But I felt like a lot of the interesting things that the first book had sort of set up, they kind of like go back on. And most of the stuff happening was either just like too stupid to take seriously, or just this nonsense YA romance crap that I did not really vibe with. So yeah, I'm not really in the target demographic for this book anyway, but yeah, not the worst thing I've read, but not something I care to talk about again. A Feast for Crows is the 4th Song of Ice and Fire book. And yeah, I have been slowly reading this series since the show ended, because we all know what happened there. And I figure, hey, if I take my time, then by the time I catch up, The Winds of Winter will be out. Boy, was I wrong. Anyway, I started reading Dance of Dragons and A Feast for Crows in the spliced method, because if you don't know, those books both take place at the same time, and they just have different POV characters, so you can read it together and follow as a coherent story. But I got really burnt out doing that, because it feels like things are just moving at a snail's pace. It takes like 10 chapters for you to get around to a certain character again, so when I was halfway through Dance of Dragons, I was like, screw it, I'm just going to plow through the rest of Feast. And yeah, Feast for Crows, I do think it is the weakest of the series, but that is by no means like a bad thing. I just think this book is a lot of setup for the eventual like Storm of Swords level book that is coming. But yeah, it's mostly that, and it ends with every character on the cliffhanger. And of course, it's only half of the characters, so a lot of, you know, my favorites, Jon, Tyrion, Davos, they're not in this one. So yeah, there's still fantastic writing. I think George R. R. Martin is one of the best fantasy writers out there. I think all the others are 5 stars, but I did give this one a 4 stars. And yeah, I should be finishing Dance this coming year, I suppose. So my book club wanted to read Apt Pupil. I had already read this. This is the only reread of the year, and also the only Stephen King book that I read this year. In 2021, I read mostly Stephen King, so I sort of took a break from him this year. But yeah, Apt Pupil, man. Whew, definitely one of Stephen King's most disturbing stories. And I think one of the reasons for that is that it's not a supernatural story. It is something that could technically happen in real life. Jesus Christ. Yes, a very troubled boy learns that there is a former SS officer living near him. But instead of turning him in, he decides to blackmail this old guy to tell him stories about when he was an officer and what he would do in the concentration camps. But yeah, I give this one 4 stars. I actually really enjoy Apt Pupil, as dark as it is. It's not like it's glorifying any of this stuff. Like, it's very clear that these things are presented in a negative light and that it is bad, and these two people are extremely messed up, and the things they have done and the things they do in this story are awful. And it's actually really fun sort of rooting against them. You know, they always build up these perfect stories and covers for the stuff they get up to, but, you know, once it all starts to fall apart, I thought it was really satisfying. So yeah, if you're interested to read it, I would check out the full collection, different seasons. Pretty much all of the novellas in here are absolutely fantastic. And then Cytonic, the 3rd Skyward book. Probably the most controversial, because like Starsight, it goes in a very different direction than the previous one. But here, it's very different, to the point where a lot of people consider this book to be more of like a filler side quest type thing. And I kind of see where they're coming from, but but at the end of the day, I still really had a ton of fun with it and enjoyed it as much as the others. But I do think it did set the stage for a pretty insane final book, so when that comes out this year, cannot wait to cover it. So yeah, another 4-star. Then Mistborn, which I started in the summer, then I read Well of Ascension in the fall, and then Hero of Ages, well, right before I started this channel. And I also did a video on those, so not going to mention them much, but I did absolutely love them. 5 stars for the whole lot. Incredible stuff, one of my favorite fantasy series ever. She Gets the Girl was another book club pick. That I did not choose. This is a teen romance book, well, like their first year of college or whatever. Definitely not in the demographic for this one, and definitely did not enjoy it very much. I ended up giving this one a 2 stars. However, there wasn't really anything offensive about it or things that stood out to me as terrible. I just didn't really care. I just found it kind of boring. It was full of tropes. You know, it just was not for me. So, yeah, thanks once again, book club. I've heard from people who do enjoy like teen, fluffy, romance, slice of life stuff that they like this book, so if you are into that, maybe, but yeah. The House in the Cerulean Sea was another book club pick, and it's something that I sort of had my eyes on, but without book club, it probably would have been a while before I got around to it. And I'm very, very glad that we decided to read this, because this book was absolutely phenomenal. It follows a social worker who is tasked with investigating an orphanage on a remote island in order to see if it is, you know, up to snuff, if they should keep it open. And you can see why people are suspicious of it, because it's a bit of an unusual place. Some of the kids there are a bit weird. Yeah. You have like there's a fairy, there's a gnome, there's a slime ball. Literally one of these kids is actually the Antichrist, so that's fun. But yeah, it's a really, really fun time. The main character, Linus, like just learning about these kids and becoming friends with them, and also the owner of the orphanage, Arthur. It was so fun. It was so wholesome. Like, this is definitely a feel-good book. However, there is still a lot of suspense to it too. There are some secrets and some mysteries that are slowly being revealed, and the last few chapters of this book were stressful, man. Oh, but yeah, by the end, I was very, very happy I read it, and I'm definitely looking forward to checking out more works from the author. Not the Omegaverse stuff he did, the stuff he has written since. This was a big old fat 5 stars for me. My Heart is a Chainsaw. Oh. I'm a huge fan of horror and horror movies. I've seen a lot of horror movies. I've seen a lot of slasher films. And this book, this was it, man. Follows a horror-obsessed young girl who is convinced that a slasher film is happening in real life in her town. And it is absolutely insane. And I really, really enjoyed it. I often find constant pop culture references to be a bit annoying, crap like Ready Player One and that nonsense. But I think the way they do it here was handled really well. Jade really feels just like a huge horror fanatic who has seen everything. So she is constantly throwing out insane references to obscure movies, a lot of which I had seen, a lot of which I'd never heard of, and seeing her treat these killings in her town, well, like it's a movie, and sort of like investigating it that way, trying to figure out who the killer is, who the final girl might be, if there is one. I thought it was just a ton of fun. However, this book also has a much more serious side to it, and once we sort of learn like why Jade is the way she is and why she turns to horror movies, it was some really intense stuff, and also, you know, figuring out what's actually going on in this town was really, really awesome. And I thought the climax to this was just absolutely insane. And I'm really, really excited for the sequel, which comes out in February. I'll definitely be covering it here. It's a 4 stars from me. I'm not a huge fan of Jones's writing style. That's really the only complaint I have. It can sometimes be a bit hard to follow, but overall, definitely recommend this to horror fans. I own these books. I should probably be showing them off. Ooh. Daisy Jones and the Six, another book club pick, and one that I absolutely would not have read without book club. Not at all. You got the Reese Witherspoon sticker, you know it's going to be a mom book, a book that my 50-year-old mother would enjoy. This is why I love book club, because I actually ended up giving this one a 5 stars. I loved this book. It's told in an interview style, and it's about a band that were popular in the 70s. It's a fictional story, but you know, it's treated like it's real. Like, we start with the formation of the band, we get introduced to all of the members, and then we follow their process of creating music, creating hit albums, and then we follow them on the road and their concerts, and you know, that rock and roll lifestyle and how it affects all of them, and how it all eventually leads to them breaking up, which isn't a spoiler. That's like the whole setup for the thing. It's like a retrospective interview going going on. But yeah, I thought everything about this was just super, super fascinating. Really well done. The characters were all sort of terrible people, but you still sort of understood why. And I really loved this interview style, how they were sort of being asked questions, and I loved how the book concluded with that. So yeah, if you have similar taste to mine and you want to step out of your comfort zone for a bit, cannot recommend this one enough. It's even getting I think a TV series starting in March, which I'm also hoping is really good. Back to back Reese Witherspoon here. I have a confession to make. I only read this book because I actually have a pretty big crush on Daisy Edgar Jones. And she was going to star in the Where the Crawdads Sing movie. I never ended up seeing the movie because I didn't like the book. So yeah, I gave this one 2 stars, wasn't too big on it. I thought the start with like our main character growing up in the marsh was really interesting. But once like all the romance nonsense started, I started to check out, and the whole mystery, this murder mystery investigation that kicks the book off, I thought would be a lot more interesting than it ended up being. Like I sort of figured out what was going on immediately, and I thought the actual, trial and investigation stuff wasn't all that satisfying. So yeah, I was pretty underwhelmed by this book. My mom liked it, so that's a thing. And yeah, I also heard the movie was not very good. Next up, after the high of The Last Olympian, our book club checked out The Red Pyramid. Now, this was a book I had also read as a kid, and I remember enjoying it quite a bit, but unlike Percy Jackson, it did not hold up nearly as well, and I ended up giving this one a 2 stars. I think Riordan is still really good at writing, these kids, these main characters. They were really fun to follow, but I think the narrative here was just a complete mess. It's too fast-paced for its own good. There's like never any moment to breathe and just, see the characters hang out. Like that's one of the things that's so great about Percy Jackson. They always have this safe, peaceful place to go and just be themselves and build up character. But here it's like the monster of the week type style of the Percy Jackson quests, but like dialed up to 11 and constant and never stopping. Please slow down. Oh my God. I don't think Rick's take on the Egyptian mythology works nearly as well as the Greek stuff does. I found a lot of elements about it to be a bit confusing, as well as the whole power system. It really just felt like a lot of the magic and stuff they used just was there to service the plot, and I don't know. I can see why kids like it and stuff, but yeah, one that did not really age well for me. I think I will still check out the sequels just to see, because I am pretty curious. But yeah, none of us really enjoyed this one, so we decided to drop the series from book club. Iron Widow by Xiranjie Zhao, I think. This was an extremely popular book that came out in 2021, written by a YouTube influencer. I have actually seen some of their videos. I think they are very talented. And yeah, so coming off all the hype, one of my friends picked this for book club, and I hated it. This was by far my least favorite book of the year. When I tear into books, I have to say no disrespect to the author, the people who do like the books, but this is just how I'm feeling, and pretty much nothing about this book passed the check for me. It takes place in a dystopian, China-inspired future where the men battle in mech suits, and they have a girl attached to their mech suit, and they absorb their life force to fight with the mech, and they fight these invading monsters or something. Now, the book does have commendable representation in a lot of different areas, and I do think it has commendable themes and messages as well. However, that's about where my praise ends. I thought the characters were extremely poorly written and very ill-defined. The story and world-building was pretty nonsensical, as well as a lot of the action scenes I found to be particularly poorly written and hard to follow. Characters make a lot of very questionable decisions that, are just stupid in general or feel like they go against the character. And the ending of the book was like a Goosebumps level ending. But at least with Goosebumps, you know what to expect and you're not taking it very seriously to begin with. This was rough. Very, very rough. I'm definitely not going to be checking out the sequel. I might watch the movie just to see, but yeah, so I know this one has a huge fan base. If you like it, all the power to you, but yeah, no. It was a 1-star, baby. The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is a sequel to The Shadow of the Gods, and the second of the Bloodsworn trilogy. This slaps, man. This is incredible. epic fantasy. It's sort of in a world inspired by Norse mythology and Viking culture. All of these giant ancient primordial beings are returning, and it follows this diverse cast of characters and shows how they deal with it all. And as a follow-up to the first book, this did everything that a middle chapter needed to do. It expands on the story in interesting ways, introducing us to more POV characters, and leaving us on a pretty insane cliffhanger for the final chapter. This is the only series from John Gwynne that I have read, but I think the way that he writes action and just details this world is so incredible and so intense. Really love the vibes for this one. If you're a fan of the new God of War games, this is what you should be reading, man. Oh, big ol' fat 5 stars for me, as well as the next one. Bit different though. I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This was probably one of the most popular books of the year, just in general. It garnered a lot of buzz, and for good reason. So I grew up with iCarly, and the Schneiderverse, if you will. I was actually quite a big fan of these shows growing up. And as I got older and, stuff started to come out about Dan Schneider and the production of some of these shows, especially the, treatment of Jennette McCurdy, I started to question some things. And this book, huge expose onto all of that. It pretty much confirmed a lot of the stuff I already knew. But yeah, it was pretty insane getting a view into what these shows were like. But of course, that's really a small part of this book, as most of it focuses on Jennette's upbringing, and, her relationship with her mother and, the showbiz industry. It was depressing, it was funny, and it was all very intriguing stuff. I listened to the audiobook read by McCurdy herself. She did a fantastic job. And yeah, I think overall, she really knocked this book out of the park. It did everything it's set up to do, and I'm really interested to see what she does in the future. The Only Good Indians. This is another Stephen Graham Jones book, which we read for book club. And this was my pick. This was one I really enjoyed. My Hair Was a Chainsaw. Made all my friends read this, and this is quite a bit bleaker. It's about a group of friends who one day, they upset something on the hunting trip, and they pay the price. Yes, this was extremely insane and creative and very dark and twisted. A true horror book with a lot of suspense, a lot of very disturbing imagery. I think Stephen Graham Jones is very good at setting up atmosphere and just this tense feelings. And yeah, it's a pretty short, breezy book. I would highly recommend this one. I would also petition for Mike Flanagan to adapt it. Again, 4 stars. Still not a huge fan of his writing style, but yeah, still very good. The Rithmatist, another one of Brandon Sanderson's YA books. Another one I gave 4 stars. Yeah, I just thought this one was super fun. Takes place at like a magical school, kind of. But our main character is not magical. You think it's going to go in a certain direction. It does not. It ends up being a really fun mystery with a bit of a weird magic system, but one I found interesting. And, for all of the praise Sanderson rightfully gets for being such a fast writer, I have to ask, hey-oh, it's been like 10 years since this book came out. Where's part 2? It ends on a cliffhanger. What you doing, buddy? My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This is the only book from Mr. Hendrix I've read. He's become quite a popular horror author recently, and we checked this out with book club as we got closer to Halloween. And, this was an interesting book. So based on the trailer for the movie that had just come out, and also just, the general vibe, it's got like this campy 1980s style to it. I mean, it does take place in the 80s. I was expecting a pretty campy and fun book. What I ended up getting depressed the shit out of me. This is a sad book. As you would expect, our main character's friend gets possessed by a demon. And then we just watch as her life falls apart, and it's really upsetting. Like, it takes a while for them to actually realize that she's being possessed, and just bad stuff keeps happening to these characters, and it is just sad to read. And once the exorcism stuff does start, we do get some pretty insane imagery, but at the same time, it didn't really do anything particularly unique or interesting. So I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It was alright. I think it's worth reading, but just know it's not as fun and goofy as the marketing led me to believe. Fellowship of the Ring. So it was long overdue for me to reread The Lord of the Rings. The last time I did it was back in high school. And I decided to do so with the new audiobooks narrated by Andy Serkis himself. And yeah, this was a 5 stars. This is one of the best fantasy books of all time. Tolkien is absolutely a master at building out his worlds, his characters, telling his story. His prose is so incredible and engaging. And yeah, I don't know much else to say. It's the Lord of the Rings. I mean, most of the books I've talked about here would not exist without it, and for good reason. I do think if you have trouble getting into Tolkien's style, I know a lot of people do, I would highly recommend the audiobooks. Andy Serkis does such an amazing job with them. Holy crap. I don't know if I'm ever just going to read these books, like read these books properly again when this audiobook exists. Like, oh. The Midnight Club by Christopher Pike. Mid is right. I'm just kidding. I love this. 5 stars. Ooh! Yeah, so Mike Flanagan made a series about this. It was good. Not one of my favorites from him, and it ended up being canceled, but it's okay because he got the Dark Tower out of it. Let's go. But yeah, this book, it's about kids in a hospice and sort of how they cope with it. They tell each other stories. And yeah, it's a very, very, very sad book, as you would expect. It would be a bit alarming if this wasn't a depressing book. And yeah, it's quite short, but yeah, I became very invested in the characters. I thought Ilonka, the main character, is like her whole story, the arc that she goes through, you know, how she deals with being terminally ill, I thought was incredible. I thought a lot of the stories they tell tied in really well to the themes of the book and made for entertaining content on their own. And yeah, it was a real gut-wrenching book, but it's gonna stay with me forever. This was a good one, man. So when October came around, my book club and I decided to check out Fear Street, and what we did is we read one Fear Street book for each week of October, ending on Halloween. And there was a nice little collection here which has the first 4 in there, which we checked out. So yeah, Fear Street, it's Goosebumps, but for teenagers, and not normally supernatural. Which I think is good, because I think, you know, teenagers, you know, the spooky ghosts and stuff don't scare them as bad because they know they're not real, unlike the stupid idiots reading Goosebumps. So yeah, it just has some more real-world horrors. And this actually predates Goosebumps, and it was some of R.L. Stine's first horror content. Believe it or not, he was once known as Mr. Jovial Bob Stine, writing joke books. And it's very clear from the first Fear Street book that he was still sort of finding his footing. But as they went on, we saw him become R.L. Stine, and it was really fun to see. I thought a lot of these books, you know, they were fun and enjoyable. Like Goosebumps, they have all these big twists, and I thought some of them were really great, especially the 4th one we read. I thought that was super well done, definitely the best one. The scores I gave range from like 3 to 4. I didn't dislike any of them, but I definitely think they got better. And there are like 50 of these, but I wouldn't mind checking out a few more at some point. I also like that, unlike Goosebumps, like these all take place in the same town, with like similar characters. There's usually a different main character, but the other characters still show up. So it helps like these all feel connected. And yeah, it was great. I also really like the film adaptation that Netflix did, the trilogy. Also thought that was very good. The Lost Hero. So the Kane Chronicles was a bit of a bust, but we decided to continue on at least with the Camp Half-Blood stuff because we were really invested in it. And thankfully, The Lost Hero was significantly better than The Red Pyramid, in my opinion. Yes, we get introduced to a whole new cast of characters. Percy Jackson is not actually in this one. Pretty bold, but I think it paid off because the new characters were enjoyable enough, and I really liked the twists they threw in the story for this series. You know, introducing the Romans, bringing back a lot of actual people from like Greek mythology rather than just, you know, the immortal beings, like you know like the old mortals, bringing them back. The middle part of this book sort of reminded me about the worst parts of the original series, where they're just going on these quests running into monsters over and over again. It wasn't super interesting, but I thought overall the story, how it ties back to the original and how it sets up more, was pretty good. So yeah, we're definitely going to be keeping on with the Heroes of Olympus, so you can expect to hear my thoughts on this more in the new year. I was gonna give this one a 3, but you know, Christmas is coming, I'm generous, I gave it a 4. Window Shopping by Tessa Bailey. Christmas is here, everyone, and I have a massive erection. Another book club book. This time it was a porn book. This is a porn book. It's smut, and it was terrible. I gave this a 1 star, but also, like, I kind of got what I expected. It's like about this this girl who gets out of prison, then she like instantly gets her dream job and meets her dream man, and they have a lot of sex. It's very descriptive and very graphic, and yeah, I don't know, this type of stuff doesn't really turn me on. I mean, I'm sure it works for some people. Yeah, the overall story it was telling, I mean, it was porn quality storytelling. It was very bad and very stupid. Again, I mean, this is probably all it needed to be. So, yeah, you know, that's the end of that, I guess. If you're looking for some Christmas smut to read, there's probably better out there. Iron Gold is the 4th Red Rising book. Now, I read the original Red Rising trilogy last year, and I loved them. I thought, well, the first book was a bit rough around the edges, like Golden Sun and Morning Star. Amazing. Amazing stuff. Some of my favorite books ever. It's just this crazy space opera about, the underdogs, the oppressed fighting the oppressors. And yeah, it's so intense. It's so brutal. It's good. And Iron Gold is the first of sort of an Era 2 type thing. I think it takes place 10 years after the original story, and here now we're going to get 4 books on this timeline. And Iron Gold was very good. I didn't like it as much as Golden Sun and Morningstar, and I think that's sort of because this was more of a setup book, setting the stage for, this new huge saga that's going to happen. So yeah, I did give it 4 stars for that reason, but I still enjoyed how we got a bunch more POV characters. We aren't just following Darrow anymore, although we still are, and his story is incredible. But yeah, we'd been following him for so long that I really enjoyed seeing what these other characters had to say and do. And yeah, the 6th book, Lightbringer, comes out in July, so I have 1 more book to read until then. I definitely will. I'll get around to it. Dark Age. And then the final one, which I'm currently getting through, is The Two Towers. Again, Andy Serkis audiobook. I just read a thing where he was doing, orc voices. My god, that dude is nuts.
But we can't run in the sunlight. You run with me, behind you, said Ugluk. Run or you'll never see your beloved holes again, by the white hand.
But yeah, all the same applies to Fellowship. This is one of the best books ever written, in my opinion. The Two Towers is just cool. Half of the book following Aragorn, half of the book following Frodo, and the Two Towers. Yeah, this is great. This is great. I'm gonna go get through more of it now. Those are all my books I read this year. A lot of great, fantastic stuff. A lot of stuff that I never would have read without book club, and a few stinkers. But that's how it is. I'd like to hear from you guys what some of your favorite reads of the year were in the comments down below. And with that, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in 2023.